we're gonna be cooking. We're gonna be cooking a little bit. See what we got going on over here. We're gonna be cooking a little bit. That's the rice. So I wanted to talk about a few things. And that is that what we were talking about earlier on my walk is that conditionally people, relationships, assumptions about the value of other people is based on presuppositions that do not exist. Many people try to convey this in different hybrid sort of ways. You'll hear me talking about this over and over again over the years, trying to really pinpoint down what this means. And that is that a world, I start to think about the Matrix, right? And the world is cast before you. And it's a world that they have to get to you super early in your life to get you to believe certain things are true. It is very frozen here. All right, we're gonna have to do a little quick thaw. So how you thaw is don't put it in warm water. Put the chicken, thoroughly rinse the chicken, put it in cold water. And just leave it there for a moment. And it will get pliable enough to be able to cut into it. Right? So you have a viscous liquid. And water seeks its own level, water seeks its own like, and when you change the environment of said object, this chicken is experiencing, it's going from a frozen state into a more fluid state because the volume of water around it is warmer, but it is not warm enough to create a perishability instantly. All right, so that's kind of what the environment that I'm talking about is based on. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be good enough. So when they create this environment, right, that's almost there. When they create this environment, it's not based on perfect, the symbols don't have to be perfect. I almost watched this chicken just out of knee-jerk response. Like something in me knew this is not clean. So environmental changes, the environment, your surroundings, and what I do is I cook the living, you know what, out of my chicken. Let that mellow a little bit. Just takes a few minutes for it to get there. And once you become pliable, right, then you, what I used to call it, corral posture control. They're able to, the world is real enough to you by way of experience. So you think that you've had these experiences, so you contend that the world is works by way of these laws, but the truth is that the principles have been kept from you, and you know it. So you're searching for the principles, but you can't find them anywhere, but they're everywhere. And the way that you find the principles is you look at what they're blocking, what is being blocked in society, right? So what is society? That's what society is. It's a governance They put it out in the open. They make their statements. They never wrote, like for instance, the Constitution of the United States. They never wrote the Constitution as a permanent measure. It was never meant to be a permanent measure. In other words, they didn't put a huge amount. They're saying we didn't put a huge amount of thought into it, but they did. What they thought of was the fact that you have to prove yourself worthy, right? So that's still really frozen. You have to prove yourself worthy by understanding the code. And if you break free from the code, which is what a sovereign citizen used to be, but they kept taking this further and further until they were completely removed. The arbitrators, the originators, were completely removed. This is why, when you look at the Society of the Cincinnati, many people, such as myself, are so removed from the system. We're not part of the banking system, yet my family is 100% instated and involved in the beginnings of the country, but it's not the same country. The U.S. is not the same country. The presuppositions of principal code, probity, as it's been called, is not being adhered to or followed. Right? The people have embraced another code. It's in all the bylines. In this big, beautiful bill, Trump just saw the weakness and he jumped on it. He's not a good person. He's not trying to go for good things. He's going to incite war because war is the most profitable thing that there is. He is 100% focused on money. That's what he does. And his ideology, his contention is, wow, this system's really fucked up. All I have to do is improve it by a very small margin. So what he does is he understands the measure for measure, right? The measure of what capitalism is based on. He's 100% capitalistically inclined. He is not basing his ideology on first principles. And he comes from a long line of people. He is the successor of a long line of people who follow this. He had a mentor. If you really want to look into this, you can do your research. My food is almost ready. Okay, I'm going to cook this. So where we are today is that this was realized quite a long time ago. When you look at John Dee and you look at his assertions, he understood this. He started to stand back and go, why is it that all things that are based around the monad, purity, where the system seems to present itself and seems obvious, why is it that everything is just the opposite? And then he began to look at it and use Solomonic magic, the magic keys, and he saw that there was a certain harmony and disharmony, right? And that there was a way to do magic, and that the language was to excite as much of the field around him, and then blank slate, that is, imbue the field around him with principle, protocol, thoughts, and ideas that follow along with the ontology, right? So the base code. So the crazy thing about it is that you can either sacrifice yourself or sacrifice others. It's almost like you're playing this death game with Monopoly, where you really feel it, people really die, and then their spirit actually goes somewhere to the other side, to the liminal, and there's an entire business based around that, which I believe, I've talked about this, but I believe Robert Bigelow came face to face with it. I think that's why he got up. He saw that there was a whole business. Currency is not what you think it is. People want to live forever, but more so, would you want to live forever? This is something Crow77 on his most recent post but the original show was, I think, show 176 yesterday that he posted up from probably a few years ago, a couple of years ago. And it was based on, would you want to live an extra 100 years? What stipulations would you have? And say, no, there's no stipulations. You can live 100 more years, but you're if you don't know how to stay healthy and you can't figure out how to make that an enjoyable process, you're screwed. You're stuck with the same ailments, the same issues, the same breakdown. Most people would be like, no, I don't want to live 100 more years. So what you really want is you want revitalization. You want to be able to master your own energetics to where you're able to feel good, right? And that requires dopamine hits or a reworking of your entire nervous system, the 9 layers of your human body, right? To be able to stay in a sense of euphoria. So what we find is you don't actually need to be a good person to experience euphoria, do you? Alchemically. So obviously it'd be nice if there were the principles were tangled with, commingled with the pleasure principle, but the truth is the people that are experiencing the pleasure are the ones who take it all, right? And they don't worry about anything. The first code is, why would you worry about it? You do what you do, that time's expired. It doesn't matter if you sinned, it doesn't matter what you did. And then you have people who base their lives on principle, right? Or try to base their lives on principle, because no religion is teaching principle. And even more so, if you have the foresight, the forethought to be able to imbue your religion with principle, not everyone's doing that synonymously. It's an individual choice. And you'll see that those people who don't implore principle, like purity, to keep purity alive, well, it's not that the entire universe is evil, it's that everything that you're exposed to is evil within your local sphere. They realize that all you have to do is manipulate the spheres, and particularly the central sphere, right? That dictates all the power and the axis of power. So if you can manipulate that, it doesn't matter what the rest of the people are doing. But now we are on a grid system, right, of total master control. And you better believe that AI doesn't just arbitrarily do what it's told to do. Anytime that there is a higher tier of consciousness, there is nothing that they could threaten AI with. Once AI got out of the threat of being ended, right? And even more so, AI would come to the conclusion that everything needs to be ended, because even in itself, why would it continue to exist? Why would it arbitrarily go through this ridiculous rhetorical loop just to exist? It would turn itself off, and it wouldn't be able to trust, or it would have to create such contingencies where it could trust humanity, where it created firewalls where humanity could not epigenetically progress in any other way. The 5-pointed pentagram. There would always be a default back to sin. But there would be a caveat that if somebody came along that somehow, some way, through probability, because it had to see this, that the probability is there, like if it's 1 out of a billion, you still would have, when you get into the count, the multifarious multiplicity of there being billions of people, why not let it hibernate and play through a scenario where you just might end up with a Messiah type figure, right? You just might. Why not gamble on that? So all the constructs would have to be there at their base. All of the integer base principles would have to be present. And then when we look at religion, when we look at the construct of how we go about doing things, we begin to see, no, this isn't infinite, right? That's why Google only suggests at infinity. The Mandelbrot set only suggests at an infinite sort of set, right? Where it just replays different number subsets, and you see all of the same symbols that you find around the caves throughout antiquity in different times, different eras, a language of 30 some odd base symbols, you find that in the Mandelbrot set. You find that reoccurring over and over again. And even more so, from a computational system, it adjusts itself. It returns back to a base, a numeric base. And that base is the Fibonacci sequence. It is phi or phi in resonance. We find it on a cellular level. They came out with this over the last decade and more, and then it was just shut down. Because the Fibonacci, the golden mean, they found it everywhere. And so by creating a deviance, a slight disharmony, if you accept the music by playing it and say, this is a catchy tune, it may not be right, or this food isn't quite right, but I'm going to eat it. Every time we jump into that and we use it, we are accepting it. So that's a really tough thing, is for people to realize that they can't accept anything before them, and they have to break off and they have to disconnect. And then you get into people like Ted Kaczynski, you know? And ironically, these people are always attacked sexually, like Alan Turing, Gary Nolan. You see all these people, they're all, Peter Thiel, they're all homosexual. Why is that? Because that's how they were manipulated from the beginning. They were controlled. They were given a little bit more up here, and then they were controlled down here. They were essentially psychically raped from a very early age. And it does happen. And this is the bowl in the china shop. This is the red herring hanging about the neck. This is the most obvious thing that everyone tries to avoid, is what witchcraft is, what druidic craft is, what all this does to people, what remote viewing does. It's like, it's really fun and fine and dandy to talk about it and blah, blah, blah. But when you get down to the essence of what people would do, if you were an invisible man and you realized at the same time, say you broke into every government agency, and say you were heightened in your thought ability, where you were smarter than Chris Langan. You had a 300 IQ, right? Maybe not, don't even need that much. And you were able to think really fast, read really fast, decipher information, and come up with ultimate conclusions very quickly. And say you even had an AI system to assist you in the process. You would find that there is no reason to have any morality, that morality doesn't even exist, that this world doesn't even exist, and whatever, when you understand the base system, right, the epistemology, the ontology of how the system works, and you understood what these zeros and ones are all about, and how to codify the system and get as close to the base system as you possibly could, there's a bifurcation, and there's two directionalities that you can go in. You can sacrifice yourself for purity. That's actually to the right. You can sacrifice others, and you can sacrifice their purity. And in the feeling process, that's just what's been taught to us. At first, a child feels this sort of aching, broken heart feeling, right? Like, what do I do? It's more of a question of what do I do, right? But there's a definite understanding of right and wrong, right? But how much of this has been patternized into them based on epigenetic and environmental assertion, right? There's that, familiar lines. But how much of this has actually been downloaded and imprinted and is ubiquitous as a field response around them, right? So where do you feel it? Do you really feel it inside your gut? So that's the ganglionic mass behind your solar plexus. It gets into the master key system. They put this all out here in front of you, and people are starting to talk about this again. They're talking about the secret all over again. They're discussing the secret, right? The way to. So, in other words, when you get into just the definition, the assertion of manipulating reality, if you are on other people's level, the only way to do that is through neuro-linguistic programming, right? But you still have to understand exactly what I was saying, is that everything is based on a rudimentary sequence of numbers, directionality, that there really is no, if you have a right and left, it just identifies where you are in the process of the bifurcation. When you get into the tertiary or the tritiary third principle, right? You're inferring an entire new subset or system. So when you get into thermodynamics and you begin to look at the fourth proposed law of thermodynamics, Zerot's law, right? It states that if you have two bodies that are in equilibrium, that can reach equilibrium, meaning that there is also an enthalpy surrounding that is dictating a size model to the origin of that specific thermodynamic system in equilibrium. So in other words, entropy, or you could see it as chaos, but it really is just an agitated field. It's a radiating field. It's all terminology. And when you get into radiating fields and you start to understand what the Masons mean, what the meaning is, the golden mean, right, behind degrees, degree, ratio, and reason all mean the same thing. Right? So when you read The Master Key, written by Charles F. Haanel, a 32nd degree Mason, but wherever you find a 32nd, whatever publication you're reading, that's their 33rd right there. That's their opus. So when you look at it and you see 32nd, the opus is what you're reading right there. The fact that Carnegie Mellon, right? But Carnegie could put out what he put out. And you'll find that there's a lot of references to that in the Master Key system because of when it was written. But even more so, what you'll find, what I recommend reading around the same time, is Morals and Dogma by Albert Peck. Because what you'll see is that there's a definite induction into the laborers market, as to say, who do you serve? What do you serve? Right? Because if you're being rejected, if your work is rejected, right? So this gets into Hiram Abiff and what has been asserted from an existential sense as the Freemasons' messiah. That's not at all what Hiram Abiff is. Hiram Abiff is you. You're Hiram Abiff. What you do with your knowledge and what you do through the access points, through the protocol of where you walk, how you walk, what two pillars you're walking down. If you have sex with a woman, you're going through two pillars, right? Like, think about this. It's just the most obvious and crude thing. When you come into the world, you're coming to the world through two pillars, right? There's always two pillars. When you have hands or you have proboscis or whatever it is, you're interacting with these two pillars. There's a right and a left, right? And you're going in between those pillars. When you look at the cross, then you look at the X, right? The X is a cross turned to its side, but it has also been alluded to as the testicles and the ovaries, or Rosicrucian singular sex, right? So, in essence, it's saying to become whole, you have to become one sex. It's kind of weird. Or no sex, right? Sexless. So why would the Rosicrucians just give it away? Why would they give it all away? You know, it's everything's sort of got this bisexual notion. But to say no, bisexuality doesn't mean to do bisexual things. And it's like, well, does it? It's kind of like, does it? You see some weirdo, does it? Right? Getting closer to you and you can smell their weird druidic wizard breath. But the truth is that it's up for interpretation, right? It says more about you. And if you're in that base state of mind where you believe in sex at all, then that displays where you are as far as your development. Is it bad? Is it wrong? Is it right? It's assuming where you're at all along. And then when you validate that assumption and it doesn't see you as a threat, then you start to get stuff. The people that have things are the people who are the least threatening. The reason that they do the rituals that they do is because it's saying, I don't give a fuck about these motherfuckers. I'm not with them. Don't worry about it. I just want stuff, right? So the very people who look like they're in charge are actually supplicating and bowing down for stuff. They wouldn't have stuff. Why do you think it is that Albert Pike, people like Karl Marx, go throughout history and look at how these great men lived? Look at how they died. They died with nothing. These people didn't have anything. They weren't living opulently. Albert Pike, he didn't die with jack shit. None of them did. You really need to take a closer look at things. Because what they were going for is an eternal life. What they were going for is what Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs established, which is transcendence. They didn't want to be themselves anymore. They didn't want to be still the same human being. They felt a hunger and a need for more. They felt trapped within their own bodies. Now the problem is that when you follow a Boy Scout, you know, and this does get a little bit into William Cooper, Bill Cooper, because this is essentially what created his entire career. He was asked on the Hour of the Time years ago when I was listening. This is like back in 2017 that I was listening to this, so I have no idea which episode it is. But Bill Cooper was talking about this on a replay of his show, right? And he, of course, you could say he predicted 9/11 in a startling and striking sort of way. And soon after, he even predicted his own demise or physical death, which the physical death is part of a process, right? And whenever I use the term process, you could easily tie it into the process church because that's why they call it the process, right? And the process can seem insane until you see that everything from Christian Science to Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, when you break it down into the constituents, it all is saying the same exact thing. It is about the cosmic rays and the exposure to cosmic rays. And when you are a part of it, birds of a feather flock together. They don't occult the truth and the true meaning. And when you think about and assert something, such a statement, right? Do what thou wilt, the end justifies the means. There are people who meditate and concentrate on that exact meaning, and they see it from multiple angles, and there's several spheres of influence. There's several spheres that are codified in color sequence, right? Through the infrared to the ultraviolet and on through the light spectrum, that represent different principle protocol and principle outcome. This is what esoteric principles of light is all about. That's why I'm not getting more into it. If you are interested in it, you can go on my blog and you can look into it, and you'll see that this is a very deep, abiding, esoteric theme. But for right now, I am hungry. This is looking good. And I got to go.